All right, this video is about trait perspective. So far we've talked about psychoanalysis, we've talked about humanistic perspective in personality. We are looking in this video about trait perspective. So first we're going to talk about what the heck is trait perspective. So trait perspective is this idea that personality has very stable and enduring behavior patterns. So the trait perspective is looking at the idea that you have things about you that is consistent no matter what the environment. And so those stable, enduring behavior patterns, those patterns of behavior, that's what we call your traits. So just like when we talked about psychoanalysis had Freud and all our neo-Freudians. When we talked about Adler and Horney and Jung, and then when we talked about humanistic, we talked about Maslow and Rogers. Trait perspective has their own psychologists. Imagine that. So Allport, Briggs, Myers, and Briggs all attempted to describe personality traits. So that's Gordon Allport right there. And then we have Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers. This, by the way, is a mother-daughter duo that actually worked on personality traits. All of them were basically trying to describe personality traits. They all had their kind of different versions. In the end, the ones that obviously came out on top that people use most is going to be the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So the Myers-Briggs type indicator describes your traits in a very positive light. And so I'll show you what I mean. But basically you are going to be looking at, you look at 4 different dimensions according to their indicator. You have 4 different traits, so to speak. And whatever they are, whatever you end up being, they always present the results in some sort of positive spin on it. So it makes it seem like, you know, there's no bad personality. They're all good, right? So they're all really good for different reasons. So it's kind of interesting because they put it in that positive spin. So what they actually look at, by the way, I'll take it down if you need to, is they look at 4 questions, basically. So these are the 4 questions that they're asking. So the first question is, are you outwardly or inwardly focused? So either you're an E or an I. So if you're an E, you could be described as talkative, outgoing. You like to be in fast-paced environment. You tend to work out ideas with others and think out loud. And you enjoy being the center of attention. But if you're an I, you could be described as more reserved and private. You prefer a slower pace with time for contemplation. Tend to think about things through inside your head, and you would rather observe than be observed or be the center of attention. Then you're probably an I. Second question is, how do you prefer to take in information? You could be either an S or an N. So an S is somebody that focuses on the reality of how things are. They pay attention to concrete facts and details. They prefer ideas that have practical applications, and they like to describe things in a very specific and literal way. And N, on the other hand, is somebody that likes the possibilities of how things could be. They like to look at the big picture and see how everything connects. They enjoy ideas and concepts for their own sakes, and they like to describe things in a very figurative or a poetic way. The third question is, how do you prefer to make decisions? Are you a T or an F? So a T person is going to be somebody that makes decisions in a very impersonal way, using logic and reasoning. They value justice and fairness. They enjoy finding the flaws in an argument, and they could be described as very reasonable and level-headed. If you're an F, you can base your decisions on personal values and how your actions affect others. You value harmony and forgiveness. You like to please others to the point of finding the best in people. And you could be described as very warm and empathetic. Then you're an F. The last question is, how do you prefer to live your outer life? Are you a J or a P? So a J prefers to have matters settled. They think rules and deadlines should be respected. You prefer to have detailed step-by-step instructions, and you make plans and want to know what you're getting into. Whereas a P is going to be somebody that prefers to leave their options open. They see rules and deadlines as flexible. They like to improvise and make things up as you go. And you're oftentimes spontaneous, enjoy surprises and new situations. Then you're a P. So if you're looking at this and you're kind of like, okay, I think I know what I am, you'll notice that in the middle There's these 16 different boxes in there depending upon your letter combination, and that determines your personality. So that's your type indicator. There is, obviously, if you have not already done this, a website online called 16 Personalities, and I know a lot of you have done it before, which is based on the Myers-Briggs. So if you haven't done it already, I encourage you to go pause the video, go on Canvas. Underneath the video notes, I do say it says personality type test based on the Myers-Briggs, and I want you to take it. So I actually want you to take it, pause right now and take it right now if you've not already done it. Even if you've done it before, I encourage you to do it again, because in theory, the way Trait Perspective explains personality, if you take it multiple times, what should happen? You should end up with getting the same personality. However, what Trait Perspective has found, and we will find as we talk later on, is that traits are oftentimes more stable as the older you get. So if you took that 16 personalities maybe when you were like in middle school or a few years ago, you may find that it may have adjusted slightly. However, by the time you get to my age, hey, all of a sudden things are a lot more stable and a lot more certain. So take a minute or two to go and do that. Okay, so pause the video, do that right now. So, what was your personality type? What letters did you get? If you can actually see here, because I know that depending upon how you're looking at this, you might be able to see the what it says reading on here as far as how that describes your personality. Last question. What do you think I am? Think about that for a minute. Got a good guess? I have had students that made guesses before, and they're like, you know, it's really hard because I don't know you in various scenarios, which is true. However, remember, this is Trait Perspective. So Trait Perspective says, does it matter that you don't know me outside of school? It shouldn't if you're in Trait Perspective. So yes, I did take the 16 personalities quiz a while ago, and there's my results. I am an ESFJ. So that gives you an idea of what it is. It also gives you my percentages. So there is that. So did you guess which one I was? Kind of interesting. All right, well, let's go back to some notes for a little bit. One of the other things I wanted to mention is that Trait Perspective, in particular the Myers-Briggs type indicator, uses a lot of factor analysis where you're trying to see groupings of behavior. So when you took that quiz on 16 Personalities website, you may have noticed that there was a lot of questions that were kind of repetitive almost, where it's asking you similar sounding things and you're like, why are you asking me the same thing over again? Because they want to make sure it's consistent. So that's kind of an interesting thing about factor analysis. Factor analysis is asking similar sounding questions to try and group behaviors together. Then lastly, there was another group called the ICE-NICS, and the ICE-NICS believed there were 2 to 3 dimensions of behavior that are influenced by genetics. The ICE-NICS talked about introverted versus extroverted, but they talked about being stable versus unstable. And so some of the trends and some of the characteristics of if you're stable or unstable, introverted or extrovert. So that was their kind of perspective. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, sorry, not that, is the Big 5 personality traits. So the Big 5 personality traits is another kind of viewpoint of the Trait Perspective. And the Big 5 personality traits isn't, we don't have to know, like the person that came up with it. But basically, these are the 5 major traits. And you can look at it as canoe, you can look at it as ocean, but it's basically kind of an abbreviation. You can see the canoe, C-A-N-O-E, or ocean, O-C-E-A-N. Either way. The 5 characteristics of 5 traits are conscientiousness, which is more about, if you know conscientiousness is more about being kind of organized and dependable and one second. Self-discipline, goal-driven. Those are all going to be conscientiousness kind of things, right? Agreeableness is going to be when you're cooperative and trustworthy, whereas neuroticism is actually kind of a negative thing, but neuroticism is when you have unstable emotions, and so your emotions aren't exactly, you're kind of unhappy and anxious all the time. Openness, you're going to be open to imagination and feelings and actions and ideas. And extroversion, most people understand extroversion, sociability, but also assertiveness and emotionally expressive. So you could talk about somebody being high or low in each of those. So this kind of gives you an idea of what a high score and a low score looks like. Somebody who's open and a low score is going to be very practical and conventional and prefers routine, versus somebody who's high score is going to be very curious with a wide range of interests. Somebody who's conscientious is going to be high score, very hardworking and dependable and organized, versus low score is going to be very impulsive and careless or disorganized. Extrovert, high score is going to be outgoing, warm, seeking adventure. Low score, quiet and reserved and withdrawn. Agreeableness, helpful, trusting, and empathetic. Low score, critical, unsupportive, and suspicious. Neuroticism is kind of the funny one because the high score actually sounds not great. You're anxious, you're unhappy, you're prone to negative emotions, versus a low score is going to be somebody who's calm and even-tempered and secure. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the big five. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take a self-assessment on the big five personality traits. So if you go on Canvas, if you scroll down under class handouts, I said I always leave the big five short. So will you take the big five inventory short? It's actually really short. There's only 10 questions. And finish that. And then if you'll pause, I will give you the answers and how you rate it in just a second. So go ahead and take that. Okay, so now that you did the big five inventory, the short version, here is the scoring. So first you have to reverse the numbers for whatever you did. You said whatever your score was for 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So for all the even numbered ones that you answered, you got to go and reverse the score. So if you said 1, then it's actually 7. If you said 2, it's a 6. If you said 3, it's a 5. And vice versa. 4 is a 4 all the time. And then to get your conscientious score, you're going to add together whatever you got from your score from 3 and your altered score from 8. For your agreeableness score, you're going to add together the scores from 2, your altered score from 2, and your original score from 7. For your neuroticism score, you're going to add together the altered score from 4 and your original score from 9. For our openness score, you're going to add together your original score from 5 and your altered score from 10. And then extroversion, you're going to add together your original score from 1 and your altered score from 6. So you may need to pause the video here to be able to get all of that, to be able to get your scores. Obviously, the traits that you actually have a higher score in, those are going to be stronger than the ones that you have lower scores in. So your highest score could potentially be a 14. The lowest score would be a 2. Okay, so that gives you an idea. And if that totally confuses you, you can just ask me in class. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.